Everything's a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, copy. Deja vu.
Deja Reviewed.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Deja Reviewed podcast, where we talk about the original versions of TV shows that were later rebooted. For season 1, we're discussing The Twilight Zone. I'm Michael.
And I'm Mark.
And today we're talking about season 1, episode 25. Mark, you mentioned that we are 2/3 of the way through the first season. It's been about a half a year. And this episode 25 is titled People Are Alike All Over. And People Are Alike All Over was originally released on March 25th, 1960. It was directed by Mitchell Leisen, written by Rod Serling for the teleplay, based on a short story, though, by Paul Fairman, and starring Roddy McDowall, who I'm sure we'll mention that we recognize, Susan Oliver, and Paul Comey.
There is a fifth dimension.
Both shadow and substance of things and
suddenly up ahead.
Just cross over. You're moving into another dimension.
Next stop, the Twilight Zone.
Okay, here's the opening voiceover from Rod Serling for People Are Alike All Over. You are looking at a species of flimsy little two-legged animal with extremely small heads whose name is man. Walter Markison, age 35. Samuel A. Conrad, age 31. They're taking a highway into space, man unshackling himself and sending his tiny, groping fingers up into the unknown. Their destination is Mars, and in just a moment, we'll land there with them.
And from IMDb's description, fearing the worst, the lone survivor of a crash landing on Mars finds the native inhabitants, to his relief, very hospitable indeed. But, Mark, there's a catch.
In the IMDb description, does it say, but Mark, there's a catch? Because that would be awesome.
It's directed, it says, but at FilmProfMark on Twitter, there's a catch. Before we get into this too much, Mitchell Leisen, the director, we've seen him direct 2 other episodes.
Oh, yeah. Which ones were they? I didn't recognize the name. I think the only name I recognize is John Brom.
Yeah, true. He directed Escape Clause. And the 16 millimeter Shrine, which we liked a lot.
We like that one.
And I think I don't know if there was I don't remember necessarily that discussion. I don't know if there was a lot of complaints about the direction of Escape Clause. It was just the badness of it.
I think the complaint about the direction might have been that the director should have realized it was bad and done something to spice it up a little bit.
Maybe we should take out all these words. That's an old Mitch Hedberg joke. Maybe we should take out all these words and replace them with all different words.
Also the plot, also the characters. Other than that, we're sticking with it. Hey, Mike, before we get into specifically this episode,
sure.
Just talk about the Twilight Zone in general. And you'd mentioned we're now into the final third of the first season. We have made it almost, I think half a year, because we took a couple weeks off at one point with this podcast. But you were mentioning just before we went on air, which I thought was relevant to this as we're examining the original versions of shows that are rebooted per our tagline, that you have not heard positive things about the Twilight Zone remake, which we have not been watching, to be clear to the audience, since we were watching this, and we're going to then go visit that at the end of this season.
Yeah. So I've been kind of kicking around the Twilight Zone subreddit, and it seems that the general tone or the general reaction to the reboot is that it's a little bit preachy. and I think for the same, I just feel like our society has gotten to the point where anytime anyone is doing anything inclusive, are like the hackles of the cis white males get very raised, and they're like super defensive about that for some reason. So I don't know. Again, we haven't watched any of it. I don't know if that's part of the blowback, or maybe it is a little bit preachy. But as I'm reading kind of some of these comments, I'm like, well, because I think the reaction is that, or the thought is that maybe this doesn't fit in with the old series, with the tone of the old series. But then I'm sitting there thinking, isn't the old series, haven't we found it a little bit preachy? Not necessarily in a bad way, but I think that the old series is a little bit preachy sometimes.
Totally agreed. Not in a bad way. In fact, I think the Monsters Are Due on Maple Street we mentioned was like pretty preachy that in a way that we thought was good. And there've been several other episodes like that. So I don't think preachy in this sense is we would use with a negative connotation, but certainly this is a preachy show in that it has a viewpoint and is trying to make you aware of something or convince you of something or a way that people should behave or change. Like that's most of the episodes seem to have something like that. And this episode as well, I think is maybe not one of the preachier ones we've had, but there's, when we get to the end scene and talk about that, I think there's some pretty preachy stuff in there.
I think it's very preachy. And just this is one of those opening narrations that really sets the tone of what this episode's going to be like. Cause as you just,
Serling does not treat humans kindly in that opening voiceover.
Yeah. That was a very aggressive, it reminded me of the, narration over in, is it I Shot an Arrow? When they land right back on Earth and the three.
Yeah.
No.
And when he's taunting one of the characters.
Yes. Was that I Shot an Arrow or was that? Yeah, I think that was
I Shot an Arrow. Yeah, because remember that's the one where the opening scene is like in mission control and they have this whole thing set up there and then it's like never followed up on or see that location or characters again.
Right, exactly.
But except for the guy looking out the window like, I shot an arrow into the air.
And where it landed? The Mojave Desert.
You know, I think you're onto two things. One is that we're in this period in time where anything that is, the least bit not all straight white males. Right. There's a subgroup of people who find that offensive and are going to be very vocal about it. I do think there's also, in combination with that, but also separately, we've talked a lot about, when we see an episode like, oh, this is one that really feels like what we think of the Twilight Zone as. And there've been a lot of episodes, some that we liked and some that we didn't. So it's not specific to the quality level that we're like, this doesn't really feel like what people think of the Twilight Zone as. And I think that's part of it too, is there's this conception of what the Twilight Zone is that I think probably isn't very accurate to, and I'm not like putting down people who think that. I think before we started this podcast, I honestly would have had a very different perception of what I thought the Twilight Zone was, and certainly would not have, I thought of it as sort of, traditional sci-fi, which often has a social message, but isn't necessarily preachy. It's like exploring an idea. And I think this show has been fairly preachy, again, not in a negative connotation. But that's something that I don't think is part of the common cultural conception. So I think I could see a lot of people, if the new one actually matches that, feeling like, whoa, why are they ruining the Twilight Zone and putting all these messages in when I just wanted my fix of sci-fi?
It's a probably perfect segue into talking about this episode because we definitely
I don't want to talk about this episode.
We definitely have talked about how these episodes fit in with our preconceived notions of what the Twilight Zone is. And this episode checks all the boxes for me of what I conceived of what a Twilight Zone episode is. Like it has that twist. It felt very Planet of the Apesy to me, which is funny because the Roddy McDowall was in Planet of the Apes, and it was very social messagey. Like you said, that Rod did not have a very positive shine on humans in this episode.
Yeah, I'm right there with you that just in terms of feeling like what we think of the Twilight Zone as, and I think also I think this is an episode that really hits both the popular conception of Twilight Zone. Like if you just showed this to somebody with no title, they'd be like, that feels like what I think of the Twilight Zone as, but also fitting in with what we've actually seen it to be. I think this is kind of an episode that straddles both of those because it has that very strong social messaging that I wish we had a better word than preachy because I feel like there's negative connotations that we're not meaning, but we'll say messagey.
Yeah.
Go ahead. So for the rest of this episode, just assume when we say preachy, unless we explicitly say otherwise, we don't mean it negatively. We just mean that it has a opinion and message it's trying to give you.
Just add preaching to the choir because we agree with the messages that are being preached.
We usually are the choir.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but I think it kind of straddled both of those, which is interesting. And we've seen some other episodes that felt very in keeping with the Twilight Zone as we've seen it, but did not fit that sort of popular conception today of it, and some other episodes that really did fit that conception that sometimes I think we're a little bit of outliers in terms of the original Twilight Zone.
Agreed. So let's get into it now that we've built this up.
All right. Well, so I want to say for me, there, there's a twist that I'm sure we want to talk about, and the spoiler alert that he ends up being, they like put him in a zoo.
Yeah.
Which I feel like I definitely have never seen this one, but I feel like this is another one that now I think back to some other things I've seen that this might have been what they were referencing, that I was unaware of. But to me, one of the cool things about this was, I think actually the most interesting question or idea of this episode, which doesn't end up being what it explores. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's something that, was kind of a throw off that I think maybe they'll explore in a future episode. But when the two astronauts, or the astronaut and the scientist who's going with them, are standing there, watching their rocket be prepared the night before, and that's kind of the opening scene during the voiceover. And then pretty quickly after, they're on Mars. The astronaut Markuson asks about it's our last night on Earth, and we should be living it up and doing all the human things, and instead we're here watching our ship get prepared that we're going to be on for, whatever the duration of this journey is, which they don't really explain. I thought, and that actually I kind of stopped and thought about, that's a really interesting thing. And I know we've talked a lot about death, which is a theme of a lot of these Twilight Zone episodes, but if you knew this was your last night on Earth, not in the sense of you're dying, but like you're going to be leaving Earth on a spaceship or going to a new world, what would you do with that last night? I thought that was actually a really interesting question. And he brought it up kind of like as a little joke with them poking fun at themselves and what they were spending their night doing. But I'm like, that's a toughie. If I knew I had one night, what would I do? The reference I thought of was, sorry, just to finish this thought, was from Armageddon, when Steve Buscemi, who's one of the miners who's going up onto the asteroid to try to blow it up, basically just like goes to a loan shark, takes out exorbitant amounts of money at an exorbitant interest rate, and just like goes to strip clubs and blows all this money to set up the joke, like at the very end of the movie when they come back and they're successful and like, oh crap, I still owe this guy all this money.
Right. Yeah, I took a note on that same opening scene, and I think what I would probably be doing 3 hours before the flight is trying to get some sleep, because they're and I like that same line. He's like, we should be in her. I think he's referring to the Earth as her, maybe, or he phrases it a kind of cool way, but he's like, we should be in her bars, dancing with her women, and it was neatly phrased. But I was like, man, go get some sleep so you don't screw something up on the trip. And of course, they do screw something up on the trip because they crash land into Mars moments later.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead. If you got a connection, because I have something connected to the scene, but I want to take it a little different direction.
Well, the just other reference that this brought to my mind was a Simpsons episode, because everything references Simpsons at this point, as they're at, I don't know what season they're on, 30 or something. Maybe 32.
I think it's, more than that. Yeah.
Anyhow, there's the one where Homer eats what they think is incorrectly prepared blowfish, which would be poisonous.
Oh, yes.
Turns out it was not incorrectly prepared, and he lives. But so he basically, they're like, you're going to be dead in the morning. And what does he do with his last night? And this is actually like, they find a way to make it funny, as Simpsons in its prime always did. But it was kind of a sweet episode. Like, he makes this bucket list of things to do. And, it was like, spend some time with his kids, say goodbye to his dad, make love to his wife. And he has this long list. And one of the things I actually really liked about that episode was that he doesn't get through the list. Cause he ends up like,
he skips over some stuff.
Well, he's like, I don't want to just run in, say bye to my dad and run out. Like, you know, they like, that's not a 2-minute activity. It's more useful, instead of checking off this other stuff, to spend more time and have a better conversation and play catch with him or whatever it is they do. I just really liked that. And it was very much one of the kind of themes of like, the extraordinary is found in the mundane. Like, everything he does is just day-to-day stuff. Like, let me go listen to Lisa play her saxophone. It wasn't, I want to go on some grand adventure or anything like that. And that to me, I thought was really sweet. And I was thinking, myself, that if it was, if I knew it was my last night, like, do something like calm, like with the family, like, have a nice dinner and play a game night or something would I think would probably be the way to do that.
Mine would be get through the next 120 some odd episodes of the Twilight Zone so we can record.
You're going to have a hard time doing that when they go to an hour. You're going to run out of time.
If I recall correctly, that episode ends, Homer has fallen asleep listening to the Bible, right? On tape, because Marge comes in
like
and
an audiobook.
He's passed out, which is a good segue. Because as an atheist, it's weird in this opening scene hearing Marcuson being like, well, I'm sure when God made human beings, for a scientist to say that, because the Richard Dawkinses, the Stephen Hawkings, the Neil deGrasse Tysons, the popular culture scientists, RIP, by the way, to Stephen Hawking. I think the popular scientists are very known, very vocal atheists. So having the Marcuson, the scientist, vocalizing this very religious idea of creation was a little bit jarring and a little bit bizarre for me, because I think, frankly, the popular sexy mentality is atheism right now. I think it used to be very taboo to not believe in God and to go to church and not have faith. And I think now it's almost swung a little bit back the other way, where atheism is a little bit more mainstream and a little bit more accepted and not celebrated, but I don't think atheists are seen as like bad people anymore the way I feel like they used to be. But it was startling to hear him so openly talking about God, and frankly, just talking about God in TV shows. Forget the fact that he's a scientist. It doesn't come up, I don't think, a whole lot in 2020.
Right, which, is one of the things, another show that we keep referencing and, have maybe looking at as our next one we keep talking about is Battlestar Galactica. And I think one of the things that I really loved about that show, because you don't see it a lot, was the sort of way it plays with faith and belief as sort of central themes and elements of the characters. And there's a lot of, similar to Lost, a lot of things where there's sort of like the logical, practical thing to do versus what the people believe or their faith tells them they should do. And those are kind of constantly at odds. So I love that. Two quick notes on what you said. One is Marcuson is not the scientist. Let's remember that. So Sam is the scientist who even says like, right. You're trained as an astronaut. I'm a scientist, a biologist, and they're bringing me along. So we don't really know what Marcuson's background is.
Although I would say astronauts are scientists, though. He's definitely not like an English major. He's certainly studied.
Maybe, but if you look in the 60s, when this is being made, astronauts were generally being pulled out of test pilots, out of the military. True. So that they were, maybe soldiers first and foremost, or pilots.
Good point.
The other thing I would say to the specific comments, I agree. I thought it was interesting. That was one of this. I think of all the episodes we've done to this point, this might be the one where I wrote down the most specific lines that I thought were. And it wasn't always they were good. It wasn't always they were just like a lot of lines where I thought the lines themselves were interesting and worth talking about when I looked through my notes. I do think you're right that there's a shift in kind of how atheism is portrayed and seen and where it fits in the popular consciousness. It's still a minority. One of the things you do see in the data, and if I had done some research, I would have some numbers to pull up, which I don't, but I'm pretty sure I've seen these on 538, is in the younger generations, there's more atheism and agnosticism now than there would have been a generation ago. But I think one of the biggest growing components is religious, non-denominational. I believe in a God, but I don't subscribe to any of these organized religions, which that was a thing I don't think you saw a whole lot of before. Which is, I believe in a God, I just don't want to spend the time and donate money to any particular church. But if I die, I want to get into heaven. That's those people. I think you could be less cynical and say I believe in some kind of higher power. And I do think, I would push back that you actually do see a lot of scientists are still fairly
faithful people.
Well, and you kind of get two poles. I think one of the things where this gets blurred is any good scientist does not just go operate off of faith as well, here's my explanation. It says this in the Bible, right? They're going to do experiments and figure that out. You kind of see two camps, which is the to go to the extremes. And obviously there's people kind of across the board in between. The group says look, everything we've ever discovered, we can explain via these natural laws and processes. There's no need to have a religious figure in it. And on the furthest other extreme, it'd be like if you look at the, how the universe was created and all the possible parameters of it, and that we happen to end up with this set of parameters that creates life, and that it happens in all these, it's hard not to see a higher power in that. And then there's everyone in between. Yeah. What I thought was interesting here about Marcuson is there are a lot of places in here, including that, where he basically just takes things on, I guess I'll say faith, and it's not even faith. Like there's several times like, well, I got a hunch that this, so it must be true. Yeah. Like I just thought he has a very interesting, his whole line there was, I've got a philosophy about people. I mean, all people, Sam, they're the same all over. I'm sure that when God made humans beings, he developed them from a fixed formula. They'd be the same here on earth as in the furthest reaches of space. Okay, so first off, exactly what you said about the God thing, just kind of a weird, or I shouldn't say weird, like an unusual statement to hear in sort of broadcast TV. But I don't know any religion, whatever Marcuson might have been, where part of their theology is like, yes, there are aliens on all these other planets and God made them all from the same fixed formula. So people like, this is just him making something up. He's like, I've got a philosophy, and then that's what he operates off of with no
basis. Isn't that what religion is?
Well, but I mean, this is not just not a scientific basis. He's not pulling this from the Bible or Quran or anything. This is literally like, he just thought about something like, yep, I think that's true. And that's my, I don't know.
I totally agree. And
maybe the founder of a religion, that's their thing. But most religions have some sort of text or prophet or something that they're treating as like, okay, what this says is where you're getting this stuff. And Marcuson throughout he's not in the whole episode because he dies early on, but throughout the whole time he's alive, he keeps just spouting things like, I got a hunch that this, and just like then operates on blind faith that his hunch was true. I thought he was a really amusing character.
You don't understand. He is the prophet, and this episode of Twilight Zone is the text. It's Marcusonism.
Oh. Why isn't that taken off then? It seems pretty good. I'm trying to think also, what's the Battlefield Earth religion? Maybe that has something about aliens in it.
What is it? What is it? No, not Dianetics. That's the book that they've
Was that Scientology?
Scientology,
is that
thank you.
Battlefield Earth one? Okay.
Yeah, I think so. It's the
that has aliens
same
in
guy that wrote Battlefield.
Yeah,
L. Ron
Hubbard.
I'm not linking that in the show notes. You guys do not read that book. Okay, what the hell is this episode about? Okay.
We're a little tangential. I was just on, we're always a little tangential. I was just on a thread on Facebook. Speaking of tangential, that's how you get there. And someone had posted like, what's the worst movie you've ever seen? And people were listing all these things, and Battlefield Earth showed up a few times. And I just wrote like, okay, I am not defending any of these movies you've listed, but I have seen literally over the years thousands of student films, and I can't like immediately jump to one, but I can guarantee you I have seen films that are worse than anything Hollywood produced.
Yeah.
Because take that bad idea, and look, I've seen a lot of great student films too. We just had our senior screening the other night, and it was great to see, some really nice work from our graduating seniors. So I'm not saying all student films are bad, but man,
that was
when
a good
film goes bad,
comment.
It can go really well, because you take like a script as bad as the worst Hollywood movie you've seen, maybe even worse because it didn't even go through rewrites, like they wrote it the day they were shooting it. And then one thing Hollywood is good at, even in their worst movies, is there's just a general level of competence.
Yeah.
Like you're going to be able to understand the dialogue. The shots will be in focus. They won't accidentally be put in upside down or they have the lens cap on, right? Hollywood just like, they know how to make a movie, even if they aren't making a good one. And so like take that terrible script. Now, instead of actors, put whoever your roommates happen to be in your dorm room, because that's who you could get to act in this thing. And then shoot it out of focus and left the tripod and the microphone at home. And now you got a movie. Oh, and then also you're editing it, half an hour before it's due. So you don't really have time to watch it through. You just sort of throw some shots into a sequence and output it so you can turn it in.
Where would The Fever or The Four of Us Are Dying rank among student films? I'm not going down that tangent. Let's get to this episode. Let's take a quick break though first, because we haven't haven't gotten to the actual past the first scene, but we're about halfway through. So let's take a break and we'll be right back. Hi, listeners. Mark and I are always working on new projects, and I'm working on a fun improvised mystery series that just released this week. Here's a little taste.
In a world filled with crime, the government assembled the Bureau, a complete collection of the nation's detectives.
They didn't technically issue me this gun that I have.
Their objective? To solve cold cases.
They would just do their damn jobs. We wouldn't have to be in this basement doing ours.
Unfortunately, most of those detectives died in a tragic karaoke outing.
Oh my God.
Leaving behind the only detectives who weren't invited that night.
I'm ready to get to work.
The Bureau Boys.
This is our first case.
It's our first case. This is our first case, okay?
The Bureau Boys solve crimes suggested by you based on tips sent in by you.
Because when we leave this door, we're on the case.
We have work to do.
I'm just being a good investigator.
My computer isn't hooked up to the internet.
Take out your magnifying glass.
Crimes which the police couldn't, wouldn't, or sometimes shouldn't solve.
Okay, so this is a cold case.
No one thought it was worthwhile to follow up on, but that's what we're here for.
If you have a clue and don't know what to do, send it to the Bureau Boys at thebureauboys.com. For better or worse, they're on the case.
Hey, I'm ready. You ready?
I was born ready. It's going to be a fun, interactive experience, so I hope you check us out at thebureauboys.com. Thank you, as always, for listening.
All right, welcome back. We are still ostensibly talking about People Are Alike All Over, and we promised in the second half of this episode to actually get to that episode at some point. And so, Mike, kind of going off the line we were just talking about from Marcus and his belief about people would look the same on Earth as they would everywhere else. And two comments I wanted to make on this. One is just in terms of the production. It's certainly convenient for those making sci-fi television and movies if aliens all basically look like people, because it saves you a lot of money on costume design and makeup and special effects and those sort of things. I'm like, oh, as soon as he said that, I'm like, good job, Twilight Zone. You just covered yourself for when all the aliens look exactly like humans. But the other part I thought was kind of interesting about that, and putting aside his whole philosophy about God created all the people to look the same on all the other planets, the interesting thing to me was that he goes in with the assumption that they will encounter other intelligent life. And most of the time in what I would say, I guess, is more realistic space travel movies, so not Star Wars or Star Trek, but things designed to seem like current reality, the assumption is that they won't encounter others, or you're very unlikely to, and it's more of a surprise when you encounter another intelligent life somewhere. And there's the whole, Fermi paradox idea about, if there is intelligent life, why haven't we seen or encountered it? So I thought it was interesting that they're going on this mission with that assumption. It kind of seemed like Sam says that he's, being brought because he's a biologist, and I got the sense, though they never say it explicitly, that they were on a mission to Mars to see what the Martians are like.
Yeah, that was the impression I got as well. Before we get off this first scene of this episode, is this
going to be a 2-part episode?
Possibly. Conrad, right? Conrad was the Roddy McDowall's character.
Yeah.
Says he wishes that he's afraid to go up there, essentially. And he has a really cool and I thought very applicable line where he says something along the lines of, I wish you could just take my mind up there and leave my body behind and just send my mind to Mars, which is basically what we're doing in this sheltering at home life that we're leading now. People are still working from home and sending their mind, and we're socializing from home. And it really kind of hit that, one, it would be super cool if we had that ability, which I guess we kind of do, to be able to work around the fact that we can't physically be around. Because one of the things that drives me nuts in TV shows and movies is when people go physically to places to have conversations with each other instead of just calling. I get, of course, it's a way better shoot to have two people having a conversation than to have people having a conversation over the phone. But everyone's wasting so much time going from place to place to have these conversations in person that aren't even meaningful conversations. But I appreciate the human ingenuity or capability to be able to adapt to these changed circumstances and to be like, I've socialized with people that I haven't socialized with in years and years and years, much more often, because it's actually easier now. And I'm curious to see, after we get through all this, if we get through all this, what it's going to be like. I think that this will have changed our social interactions and our behaviors and a lot of our work behaviors, frankly, certainly a lot of our being in public behaviors. And I think probably irreparably, not necessarily irreparably, because some of it I think is for the better, but I think unrevocably, I guess would be the way to say it. I think some things will change and not go back.
Irrevocably, is that the word you're looking for?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, you mentioned the work thing. I think it was just last week, Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter, basically said any employees who just want to keep working from home forever can do that. We seem to be functioning fine with everyone working at home. So why and I think you're going to see, I think you're absolutely right, particularly in the large social gatherings thing. So I think how long it takes to kind of get back to that and how those are treated, that might be permanently changed. But certainly on the workspace, if I'm, the CEO of some company, and let's say, obviously it will depend what you're doing, what the company does and what their needs are. But if we've been functioning fine with everybody working from home, I'm going to start to think, well, why are we paying for so much office space and for this prime location, wherever our, main office may be? There's always going to be some things that you need to be physically there to do, but okay, if we could shrink our footprint by, even 50%, we could save a lot of money there. And it seems like people are functioning fine working from home. The social thing you brought up is, I think, the more interesting question, because people are finding ways to do it. But I don't want to get off on the whole stupidity of some people at this point. Throwing the usual, this isn't a politics podcast, but my home state of Wisconsin is certainly showing some people behaving stupidly lately.
I tweeted that at you earlier today.
I saw that. I had no comeback. Like people are being dumb. I do think it shows, and a lot of the Twilight Zone episodes have been about people being alone and the sort of stressor of that, and in several cases going nuts or becoming suicidal. I think people are appreciating the ability to use things like Zoom and stuff and maintain these social connections at a distance. I do think there's a strong longing to just be able to get together with some people in person again.
Agreed.
That physical proximity is something that we're, I think, wired for.
I just had a conversation to your first point with the closing I was at this morning. One of the couple is a real estate broker, or works for a real estate brokerage, commercial real estate. And I was asking her, I was like, what do you think is going to happen with real estate prices, with lease prices, particularly commercial lease prices, which I'm very interested in because I'm currently under lease for a commercial space that we might, when we come through all this thing, I might have to be like, okay, well, we're now $2 per square foot over market value now. We have to talk about that. And she made the exact same point that you did, that if these companies realize they don't need to maintain a physical presence, and it's so silly. I remember the second job I got out of law school at the firm. I could have done that from home. Like any of this stuff could have been done from home, but there is something about FaceTime and just showing your face and showing up and being like, oh, we're watching you work. We're watching where our money's going. And I get it for like the old school people, but if the work's getting done, because let's face it, I'm sure you've read studies before. I think it's like 70% of the workday is just wasted time for everyone anyhow. And if you didn't have to add a commute on top of that for people, you'd probably find a lot more efficient work being done, or you'd find that you don't need as many workers. And I don't want to encourage companies to start cutting back and laying people off. I think that this will be a very changed world one way or another, some parts for the better and some parts for the worse when we're done with this. And that line kind of reminded me of the situation we're in.
Yeah, I thought that was very astute. I didn't make that connection, but as soon as you said it, I'm like, oh yeah, that's really the connection I made, of course, because I immediately go to movies instead of thinking what's happening in real life, was to Avatar, where they like take their minds but put it into a different body to go, explore the new planet and stuff. And apparently 4 more of those movies coming out.
Oh, great.
The thing you just mentioned that kind of got me thinking was how things would change and what the sort of unintended consequences of that would be. And I have no evidence for this. I'm just going to speculate, Marcusson style. I think it seems to me that there's a lot of your day-to-day work you could do, again, depending on what the job is and stuff, but there are a lot of jobs that a lot of the day-to-day work could be done remotely, work from home, everybody on their own, and just, have Zoom meetings or whatever when you need to converse with people. I wonder if we did that over, obviously we're doing that now out of necessity. And if we went to something close to this degree of that over a long term, whether out of necessity or out of choice, and companies saying, hey, we don't need to pay for all this space or all these people to be here and we don't need to commute or whatever. I wonder if you'd see maybe more efficiency, maybe not. I find I'm less efficient at home. But the other thing is you miss those sort of accidental interactions, right? The thing where instead we didn't have a scheduled Zoom meeting, but I just had a thought about something and I popped to the office next door to just ask somebody what they think. And a lot of creative new ideas come out of that. Like, I wonder if we would be really good at getting all the stuff that we knew need to be done, getting all that done, but we would be less creative and you'd see less innovation. That's the thing I would wonder about.
And that's a very good point. And there is still the capability of doing that in a text, in Slack, in one of those things without having to set up a Zoom meeting and a phone call and do all that stuff. But I guarantee you there would be good ideas lost between the time I thought of them and I could have just yelled it across the hall to the other office and the time I got to my desk, to my phone, because I have ideas, I'm sure brilliant ideas that have just fallen out of my head before I got a chance. I've either been driving, haven't had a chance to write them down, do a voice memo, something like that fall out of your head. So I think you're right about that.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking of, we had one of our alums was in talking with my editing class via Zoom this semester, who works on the Late Late Show with James Corden.
Oh, cool.
And he's an editor on that, and was talking about, like, to some degree, like they have a really robust technical infrastructure, and he can edit from his house and get files to and from people who need it. And he said one of the things that was really surprising was when they first went to everybody working from home, how everything just ground to a halt, even though a lot of the tasks theoretically you could work fine working from home on your own. He's like, we didn't realize how much of this stuff does depend on just me, like, yelling something to the guy next door or, running into somebody in a hallway. Like, he's like, we had no idea that those informal interactions were so important to the way we had been working. He's like, and we've sort of figured it out now how to keep things going. But he said they really struggled and slowed down a ton at the start, not having realized that was a big part of their workflow and how they got things done.
And how are you going to meet at the water cooler and talk about the most recent episode of Deja Reviewed? Which, speaking of, let's also point out.
First off, the problem with that would be you'd go to the water cooler like, gee, the latest Deja Reviewed, and everyone else like, what the hell is that? So you need to have a critical mass of people who are actually listening to it in one place. And I'm not sure where we have that.
That was kind of the joke.
I like to explain the joke. This is like my 8-year-old son who will tell you a joke and then immediately explain to you why it was funny.
We are in a little bit of an amazing niche. This is kind of applicable to us because we're two people. Think of all the technology that it actually takes to produce this podcast, because we're two people watching a show from 60 years ago and doing an after show in two different states, however, 1,000 miles, whatever, 900 miles, however far apart we are from each other. And it sounds like we're right in the room.
Well, that's really true. I hadn't even thought about the watching a 60-year-old show. Yeah, like if this was 10 years ago, would we have been able to do that? I don't, Netflix on DVD was around. I don't know if Twilight Zone was available on DVD. And then, the last part too of then getting this distributed to anybody. So whether or not anyone is listening, anyone anywhere can access this and listen to it at whatever time they want. Yeah, that's a ton of technology. Should we bring this back to the show?
Yeah, I got some stuff. So
what do you got, Mike?
When that rocket launched, it was a much better rocket takeoff footage sequence that we saw than we saw in, I forget which one was Elegy, I think was the really bad one.
Yes.
That looked very juvenile.
No, they got some really good stock footage for this one.
But then them landing on Mars or crash landing on Mars looked absolutely terrible.
It looked like the George Méliès trip to the moon, where literally the rocket ship comes and like hits the animated moon in the eye. Like, and that's what the scale was. And I know in the 60s telescopes existed. They knew what Mars looked like. That does not look like any picture or image I've ever seen of Mars. It almost looked like a fruit that was like a bite out of it. And there's the weird lines, and I thought maybe they were trying to show like at that. I don't know if at that point they still had the idea that there were canals on Mars and maybe trying to show that. I don't know. It was a very weird design.
I'm so glad you said that. I had that note. I thought it looked like a cluster of cells, a blastula, if you will. And I was thinking the same thing. And I was like, my initial thought was that they didn't have good enough telescopes to see what the features of Mars actually looked like. And that was their best guess of it. But if you have more knowledge.
No, they've had telescopes that can make out Mars pretty well for like hundreds of years.
Okay.
Like not the, NASA flyby level photos that we might have now, but like they definitely knew Mars didn't look like that.
Yeah. Okay. Then that looked horrible. But that was a perfect segue into this. Another thought that I had, did Twilight Zone have, as a series, have the absolute worst astronauts that have ever been assembled? Because we haven't seen, I don't think, any successful missions so far, 25 episodes into this series.
Third from the sun. I mean, technically they weren't humans. Good point. So no, we have not seen any successful. That's really good. So we got we got I shot an arrow.
Crashed.
We got Elegy.
Crashed.
Where they were lost and ended up in one place.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I guess they
actually
didn't
the best astronauts we've seen are the ones from The Lonely who go check on the prisoners and bring them supplies.
Yeah, good point. And the guy who lost his mind before he even left Earth, and where is everyone? He was smart enough not to get on one of those death trap rockets.
Which was still one of my favorite things that basically like, let's drive this guy insane, then he can be an astronaut.
Yeah. So I thought that was super bizarre.
Marcuson did remember his sense of duty to his country, though, because like his first thing when he like sort of half wakes up after being injured in the crash, like, let's go plant the flag. Like, really? You're dying. You're on an alien planet. You don't know if there's life outside, but we better make sure that American flag gets in there.
That was like, we're not going to stay at home. We're going to go show our AK-47s outside the Michigan Capitol. That was the level of jingoism.
Marcuson would have joined them.
Yes. I do appreciate, speaking of Marcuson, that when Conrad goes to, because Marcuson gets knocked out in the crash, Conrad goes to, I don't know, I guess it was adrenaline that he injected into his arm. I was hoping for a Pulp Fiction-y stabbing it in the chest, but he injects something into his arm that wakes up Marcuson. And I just want to thank the Twilight Zone for not doing the shots where it makes it look like the needle, they kind of hid the needle going into his arm. Why does every TV show or movie that seems to be giving a shot insist on making it look like the needle's actually going in? We don't want to see. I don't want to see that. Don't do that. So I appreciate that the Twilight Zone did not do that.
Oh man, I'm like here shuddering just thinking of those shots from Requiem for a Dream where they're shooting the heroin up into the infected arm.
Yes, horrible.
Well, okay, I got to get my mind off that image with a different one. We were criticizing the effects of the ship and the whatever they were pretending was Mars there. I still think it was like a peach with a bite out of it.
It didn't look like a planet. I agree.
I will say it's clearly a set when they've crashed and we come back to it. And what I was comparing it to a lot of things that you get in sort of, again, realistic style space movies today, something like Apollo 13. Or
I was going to say, I missed that one.
Apollo 13 or Gravity or First Man. There was the Neil Armstrong movie that was out, or even something like Armageddon, which is not realistic, but even comparing this to that, all of these have like the idea of like, we're on the cramped spaceship in these tight enclosed quarters, and they're in like a freaking townhome in their set with like just giant, empty, completely wasted space. If the thing had been vertical, these would have been like 15-foot ceilings. But I did like that they had the whole thing sort of tilted on its side and like lights hanging down and stuff. I thought that was kind of a neat perspective. And it starts with Marcuson like almost hanging upside down because he's like buckled into his seat, but the ship is flipped over and he has to like use something else as a ladder to climb. So I thought that was cool. But the amount of space in these I thought was really funny, and it makes it look so much like a set too, just because you don't get any sense of confinement. You get the sense of here's 3 walls of a set and there's this giant open space behind it where the cameras and crew will be.
I agree, but I did have the note that I actually it was completely illogical and wasted space, but I really liked the look of the crashed ship set. Like it was very, very neat looking. So I'm glad you said that at the end of it.
Yeah. And I thought one of the better sort of putting aside the wasted space thing, which is an ongoing theme in all the Twilight Zone rocket ships, except for the Lonely, where they don't have room to bring back the sex bot. But the design of it was cool. And I thought this was one of the better looking ones in terms of that. Like, looked a little less cheesy, and they had sort of the damaged metal around and things hanging from cables that had
swinging back and forth.
That was pretty cool. I dug that.
Did you think it was a little weird that Marcuson goes, any landing you can walk away from, remember? And I get that
dies.
But I get that that's a common phrase, but they hadn't said it to each other in that episode. It was weird that it was basically, we talked a lot about setup and payoff in Long Live Walter Jameson. And I did look up at Walter Jacobson was a news anchor in Chicago.
Oh yeah, that's who it is. Okay.
We only had the payoff of that line with zero setup to it. I thought that was kind of a strange choice.
I'm glad you mentioned the setup and payoff, because I wrote down the same thing that last episode we had a little bit of different feelings on. Again, this was the one that you loved and I liked a lot, and you were upset that I didn't love it. But, we were talking about the setup and payoff and foreshadowing of things. And I wrote the same thing, that this episode has a lot of setup that doesn't pay off and payoff that wasn't set up. That's kind of like an instance of the latter, where it totally feels like this is a line they're referencing. And maybe they shot it when they're watching the rocket getting ready in that opening scene and it got cut for time. Like maybe that line had been in there.
Good point.
And they forgot to cut it in the later scene. But the setup with no payoff is when they're on the alien planet, the one female alien, I think is the only alien who gets a name, Tina or something.
Yeah, Tina.
There's this all this dynamic with them, that there's going to be some sort of relationship, or she is going to spoil the secret or something. And their quote unquote payoff is like when she's part of the crowd looking at him at the zoo, she turns and runs away, but there's no follow up on that. Yeah. That to me was the weirdest, 90% of a subplot that just was never resolved.
I have a note about Tina that just says, maybe keep Tina away from him entirely, because there was no point in her, she's going with them to show him the house and do all this stuff. She's clearly upset. There was no reason for her to be there.
She was clearly about to spill the beans.
Right. And it was so dumb. And so you guys, of course, I'm sure you probably know this. The ending is that he is caged. They create him this house that has no windows. I will say, I thought the musical cues as he's figuring out that the house, what was actually happening in the house and he's trapped in this house, it was a cool change. The music gets more and more frantic, more and more ominous. And I thought that was really neat. But the whole payoff is that he's an animal in a zoo. And you know how much I love my dogs. I don't know if you just heard one of them barking just a moment ago, but the more I have pets, the less fair I think it is to have pets, because I worry about them being bored. And I think about zoos all the time, and the zoos that are run correctly can be very important learning tools, and are I think do challenge people to respect animals and not fear animals. But it's also pretty horrible to cage wild animals. And it made me think of Tiger King, because Tiger King is obviously very much in the human zeitgeist right now. Everyone's streaming it because we're all stuck at home. He obviously doesn't have the educational motivation. He's just driven by money. But it's so cruel what he's doing to these amazing animals that could kill us all. And I don't know. I think these are going to be my last pets, the ones that I have now, because I don't know. I mean, who am I to have imprisoned them and cut off their genitals and have them and feed them when I decide to feed them? I don't know. The more I have pets, the less fair I think it is to have pets. They probably agree with me.
Yeah. I don't have any pets. I'm not a huge fan of that, but I have I guess I don't really have a moral issue with people having pets. I just don't have any and don't particularly want any. I think some people have pets and do weird things with them.
Yes,
for sure.
very much. It reminds me of a story when I was taking the first one to dog training, dog obedience school or whatever. Ran into a guy who was telling me that he bathes with his dog. He takes his dog into the bath with him every single night. I was like, you, sir, are under arrest. It was the weirdest.
That's not right.
Even if you weren't getting in the tub with your dog, you shouldn't be bathing your dog that much. So if you're listening to this, don't bathe your dog that much, and don't bathe with your dog. That guy was weird.
We had a cat when I was growing up that and cats generally don't like to get wet. They do not like baths. Water. They do not like being in the rain and such. And we had one cat that was kind of interesting that if somebody had left the bathroom door open while someone was taking a shower, it would come and like sit on the edge of the the tub because it wanted to like get a little bit of the spray but not really get wet. And you'd be like in the shower and then like you look over and there's something, this animal there staring at you. It was kind of weird.
Yeah. My cat does that sometimes.
You know, I want to give a little shout out to zoos. And I think the key thing you said is like a sort of well-run or not zoo, and there are obviously a lot of places where people keep animals, I think, that should be shut down. But I think some of the well-run zoos, there's the educational aspect in getting people to like see and hopefully understand and have a little more empathy and respect for other species besides just humans. And I'll also say, I think a lot of good conservation work is done through zoos at this point. And it's kind of, that's where,
and research,
they're putting more of their money into research and conservation efforts. And part of that is the educational, and part of it is doing it where, wherever the animals are from. And I also think there's a difference between, I don't think, at this point, any sort of reputable zoo is like going out and capturing animals to put them in zoos. They're basically dealing with animals that, that were found injured and sort of nursed back to life and can't go to the wild, or were born in zoos and stuff. So, and in some cases, the only surviving members of some species are now in zoos.
True. And I'll take that opportunity to give a shout out to my kind of first summer job was at the Brookfield Zoo in Brookfield, Illinois. And they are one of the reputable, great teaching research zoos that if you guys ever want to donate some money their way, it would actually go to a good cause, the Brookfield Zoo. Anyhow, back to this episode.
Yeah.
I'll give a shout out. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, just before we get entirely off of their space flight, something that we've criticized Twilight Zone for before sometimes has been sort of the distances and times that they use in terms of space travel. And so so now I'm always curious when they actually use a specific number. So I looked it up and it said they came 35 million miles, apparently from Earth to Mars. And that actually is pretty accurate to the closest distance that Mars ever comes to Earth. But there's wide variation because we're in two different orbits. So I actually looked up right now, Earth and Mars are about 104 million miles away. Okay. So like 3 times as far. So that actually does match about the closest. When this episode aired, the last time that we think Earth and Mars had been that close was about 60,000 BC.
Oh, wow.
But hit it again in August 2003. And so I was like, that actually could have because this could be set like 40 years in the future, right? Because we always talk about in Twilight Zone, like where they were in 1960s, space travel was not even what it is now, which is still not very much. So that could have been like, okay, this is set 40 years in the future and that's the closest they're going to be. So that's the time we're going to make a jump for it. So I kind of like that. I have no idea if that was planned out to work that way or intentional, but the fact that it literally was like the exact distance, I thought maybe it was, and I thought that was kind of cool.
Who is this person that's done research, and what have you done with Mark?
No, I think if you look back, the only time I've ever done research is checking their math on astronomical distances. Yeah. Because as we always say, like humans are really bad at this stuff, and I have no sense. Like when they said 35 million miles, I was like,
that makes sense. I didn't even look it up.
Maybe Earth to Mars, but I was like, but maybe that's like only a third of the way, or maybe that's way overshooting. Like I really have no idea.
I totally agree. So I'm going to give a shout out because then I'm going to give a hilariously bad thing. Well, let's do a shit sandwich, but the reverse. So I'm going to put shit on both pieces of the bread. Marcuson's acting, bad. I'm just going to flat out say Marcus's acting was bad.
No, his acting is very good because the director said you're scared, and he just played scared that note until he decided things were good, and like now you're not scared, and he played not scared until it was time to be scared again. Those were he had a full range of 2 emotions.
Now my compliment in the middle of it. I really liked the outro to the first commercial break, the door slowly opening of the ship, and you kind of see Conrad's face coming into view as he's holding this pistol and freaking out. I thought that was a neat thing.
But you don't see what he's looking at. I like that too. That was a really good teaser for the next. And also throughout, and I don't want to get out of the middle of your shit sandwich here, but I'll just say in general, I thought something this episode did well was it kept really postponing the reveal and giving us the information and stuff in a way that didn't feel as bad as some other episodes. And an elegy, I'm looking at you, where like we're like, no, just tell us what's going on. And they kept like making up reasons to not have to do it. We're 8 minutes into this episode when Marcuson basically, like when he wakes up and they still haven't even left the ship, and we're a third of the way through, and then we get to this commercial break just before the halfway point when the door is opening. We're finally going to see what's on the other side. I thought they did a really nice job of postponing without feeling draggy or boring, letting you know what was going to happen, like keeping that suspense building.
And what was on the other side? But old man bare leg. And I could have done without all of the old man bare legs in this episode. I was really getting kind of bothered because for some reason all the Martians are wearing like togas of a sort, and I could not stop looking at these old hairy man legs. It was getting on my nerves. There is a hilarious extra. Remember the extra that kept blinking in Elegy in the band? So when they're going to so Marcuson dies on the ship and the Martians are going to get Marcuson's body from the ship. And I don't know if you noticed this, but there's an extra who cannot figure out where his mark is. He like blocks one of the main Martians, like one of the main characters of the thing. And then he realizes he's blocking him. And then he like backs off. And then he like moves forward again and blocks him again. And you can see this extra trying to figure out where his mark is. And I was laughing so hard. I had to rewind it a couple times just to watch this extra. So if you guys go to the part where they're taking Marcuson off the ship, and it is just about the funniest extra acting. And they picked this guy, I'm sure, because he's a big burly guy that would actually help carry Marcuson out. But it is hilarious. And also, speaking of his bad acting, Marcuson, I've mentioned this before, but Marcuson is like taking very deep breaths for a dead man. I was wondering to myself, could actors in the 60s, like, is it because of all the smoking that they couldn't hold their breath for like a single shot, like a single moment? Because he's taking like gulping, heaving breaths as they're dragging his supposed to be lifeless body off of this ship.
I did not notice that extra, but now I'm going to go back and watch that. And I have a feeling this is going to be like the stormtrooper hitting his helmet on the door on the way in, where like once you've seen it, you can't unsee it.
It's so funny. It's so funny watching that guy.
The guy that I noticed when we first started seeing the Martians is the older one of he kind of seems like the leader. Yeah. He has like an extra sash over him. And Brett, that's how you distinguish him, I guess, between the several old men. It wasn't Henry Gibson, but he reminded me of Henry Gibson enough that I was like, I wonder if this is a young Henry Gibson from The Burbs, which we talked about the other day. So I went and looked. Holy cow. It is not. But Henry Gibson does actually appear in an episode of Twilight Zone in 1986 in one of the relaunches.
Get out of town.
Which I thought was cool. And I also thought, I was looking through his filmography because I feel like I've seen him in a lot of things. And what I thought was interesting looking through Henry Gibson's filmography, and now I'm just talking about an actor who's not even in this episode. Definitely The Burbs is like the first thing I think of him from.
Yeah, that's a great call because I did feel like that guy was familiar.
But I feel like I knew him from other stuff. And I looked him up, and he had a supporting role in the film Nashville, the Robert Altman film, and got a Golden Globe nomination for Best Supporting Actor and some Critics Awards for that. But never really like broke through after that. And really, it was interesting. He's one of these who his whole career was like guest spots on one episode of a TV show, or like not even a supporting character, but like a tertiary character in a movie. Like throughout his whole career, he had a lot of the parts where it's like, man doing this or something, like something where it's enough of a featured extra to be credited, but maybe you only had one line or no lines. And I just thought it was interesting because I feel like he has such a recognizable face that he seems memorable to me. And it was interesting to see that he never really did break out. I mean, he obviously had a successful acting career, but never made that jump.
Maybe you recognize him as the voice of one of the episodes from the Stripperella TV series. Could that be it?
That must be it.
He was in Boston Legal as a judge. You talked about Boston Legal.
That's another one where he's recurring in that, but it's like a judge that they see, one every 15 episodes or something,
I'm glad that you said that, because I that was who I was trying to picture, because he did definitely remind me of that guy. He was in Magnolia. Right? I guess I would sort of recognize him from that. Sorry about my dogs. I love them, but I'll get rid of them as soon as possible. He was in Mad About You. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, he's been in a lot of stuff. Like, he was definitely a successful actor, and I'm in no way knocking him, but like he's one that I feel like should have been in more like starring or like secondary character roles.
Considering how much we recognize him. That's a good point.
Yeah, and I always, whenever I've seen him, I've always liked him. I think he's like very expressive facially.
Yeah.
Like he's definitely a character type.
But just to be clear, he is not in this episode.
He's not in this episode. Okay, so can I share a thought on, I would like to rewrite this episode more interestingly.
Okay.
Because when he first gets off the ship, and I did think they did a nice job kind of stretching out, like Markison's like blathering on for a while without any indication that they understand English or can.
Conrad. Markison is dead.
Yes, Conrad, you're right. Markison was dead. Yes. Okay, thank you. But Conrad's blathering on. They're just sort of staring at him blankly. And you would think as a scientist at some point he would have been like, wait, let's see if you understand. But then they start speaking English. He's like, wait, how do you speak English? And their response was, they use this phrase, the unconscious transfer, and they said that actually he's speaking their language. And they said it's kind of like hypnotism, so that everything kind of seems normal. And I had two thoughts on this. First one is, why not just say that instead of like making up this whole elaborate scheme, just say like, oh, we've caught Earth's TV and radio transmissions and learned English that way. Fine. That's been, plenty of other sci-fi things have played that card. But then I was thinking like, this is too weird of an explanation and making it way more complicated than it needs to be, that there's got to be some purpose. So I was thinking, okay, they said this is kind of some kind of hypnosis to make things seem normal to him. And I was guessing that they were going to turn out to not look like humans, because so much of the episode has been set up with Markison's philosophy about humans are going to look the same everywhere. And it's the freaking title of the episode. People are all alike or whatever, something like that.
People are like all over.
People are like all over. So I really thought it was setting up. And then at the end, he's going to get like unhypnotized and realize they're actually, tentacle beings or something like that, which I thought would have been much more interesting and a payoff to all this setup. And no, it was like they just made this weird, unnecessarily complicated idea about the unconscious transfer and hypnotism for no reason and never follow up on it. I think my episode would have been more interesting.
I'd watch it. Can we, speaking of Twilight Zone astronauts, can they stop trusting aliens? Do you remember in Elegy when they immediately started drinking the thing that the guy gave them? This guy, now that didn't happen to him. They didn't get poisoned, but he starts drinking scotch that they've prepared for him. And also a weird move. He puts a little dab of the scotch behind his ears like cologne, which I thought was kind of fun. And
I caught that too. And I was like, is he trying to seduce Tina with that he smells like a drunk? Also, again, with Serling holding humans in high regard, I thought it was funny that when he gets this sort of human house, the supposed scientist who should be intellectually curious is immediately like, something that looks exactly like home. I'll just stay here instead of asking questions about this alien world or race. But then the very first things he does is like, I need a drink and I need a smoke. That's humanity.
By the way, I did just look up to see if there was the origins of the phrase wet behind the ears. It has nothing to do with what he was doing, just for the record. Not that I thought that phrase came from
That would have been awesome if you looked it up and it's like in an episode of Twilight Zone.
Yeah, and I didn't assume that, but I was wondering if that was somehow a thing that was connected. But anyhow, it's not.
Yes, but astronauts should be less trusting of the alien species.
So then I have to just do this other connection. We don't have to get back into the sheltering at home thing, but I feel like his caging in this very nice house with scotch and cigarettes and all this stuff, is how people are acting like they're being treated in this sheltering at home. Like we're so trapped, but we're still free. We can still go outside. We can still do things. And by the way, that wouldn't be the end of the world if you were in this very nice house with this food and all this stuff and you don't have to work and there's people gawking at you would be obviously horrible. But I feel like the way people are reacting to the shelter at home orders is like how Conrad reacted to being actually encaged in a zoo. And I thought that was kind of funny.
I will disagree with you. I think he reacted better than many people are
True.
reacting, because he actually has a thought and starts talking to Marcuson, and that makes him sound crazy. He's not like, it was one of those, like, I know you're up there listening somewhere.
Right.
You were right. People are like all over, which I thought was a super great, like, commentary line. Cause yes, if we got aliens, we would either put them in a zoo or dissect them.
True.
I totally bought that. But like, he's still doing some intellectual processing on it instead of just like, me no likey not being able to get a haircut for 3 weeks.
Instead of
Stop
taking
impinging on my rights.
Instead of taking an AR-15 and just shooting up the place, he decided to actually think. Speaking of that, that ending, there is a hilarious freeze frame on the zoo exhibit sign. And I assume it was so we'd have time to fully read it, but there was plenty of time to fully read it. So it cuts down to like
maybe people read slower in the 60s.
Could be.
Because they were all drunk and smoking too much.
There were fewer words that they had to know though, so they should have read faster. But it like pans down to like man and Earthman in like his natural habitat or something. And it pans down and then it like there's this very awkward freeze frame so we can read the zoo sign, and I just wanted to point that out. But that was kind of all
Marcuson has this line sorry, go back a second to his reaction to it. He had a line before he knows that
Conrad.
He's in a zoo. What is the hell is wrong with me?
Nothing.
I've been cooped up too much. Stop infringing on my rights. It's my right to say wrong names whenever I want and to be correct. Don't criticize me for being wrong. He has a line, Conrad has a line before he finds out he's in the zoo, but when he's in the house, and he says, if it's an illusion, a guy can live with it, which was interesting because he's like, this might not all be true, but I would just be okay with this and being in this house. And it's only when he realizes it's like part of a zoo that he's like upset about it. Like you got the feeling he would have been fine just staying in that house otherwise.
I think though he thought he still had a chance with Tina at that point. And like,
well, he did have the scotch behind his ears.
So I think that was a realization, but you're right. I think his reaction was more to being objectified and trapped forever. And you never know. Cause they did say to him when he crashed, they're like, we'll fix your ship and we'll do all this stuff. So maybe he still thought he was going home as he was living in all that stuff. So
yeah. Although I thought it was funny, even when they said that first line, like, oh, we can fix your ship. I'm like, okay, something's up here, because if they know how to fix a spaceship, then they should know how to build a spaceship, which means they would have come to Earth. The fact that they've made no contact with us tells me something's wrong.
Yeah.
I also wanted to say, so when they go, they have him like spend the first night in the ship, and then they come out to get him and like, yeah, we're, he wants to see the city. They're like, but first we have a surprise for you. And I was just like, wait, he landed on an alien planet, finds humanoids there, and they speak English. And they're like, but wait, we have a surprise. Like, that was not surprising enough.
I also like when he first lands and he's like, here, I'll show you. And he starts drawing in the dirt. He's like, here's Earth, here's you, here's the sun. It's like, okay, just.
Which was also before he knew if they spoke English.
Right. Yeah. He was a kind of a crazy person.
At least he didn't just draw 3 telephone wires and like, see humans.
That's kind of all I had to say about this one, which was quite a bit, Mark. But do you have any other thoughts, or should we do closing narration?
I have 3 very quick thoughts that you don't need to comment any further on. I just wanted to get them in the record. I'm like, the congressional testimony where I have to read a statement into the record. One is they never mentioned anything about how he's breathing in Martian atmosphere. And I'm pretty sure by the 60s, we had some sense of what the atmosphere on Mars was and that it was not breathable. So I just thought I thought they like go to lengths to explain some things and then just like completely paper over other stuff. We've talked a lot in some of the past few episodes about gender issues. And this is, I think, the pinnacle of the one female character just being there to be like a prop or plot device, someone for him to feel affection to. She's the only one that he even bothers to ask the name, which in some sense, like, so she's named. So you would think that makes her like more important, but it actually like objectified her even more, like, oh, she's pretty, I should learn her name and then go listen to the old guys tell me things.
Right.
And then my last thing, which this is a little production thing, but it super bugged me because this is something we talk about in my very first semester, like intro production class. Like, here's how to make your movie look amateurish is when you zoom in and zoom out. And there's a shot where Marcuson dies when they're still inside the ship, and it's on Marcuson and Conrad together. And then the shot like zooms out to show them a little bit wider, and then like zooms back in to show them a little bit tighter. And it totally looks like the camera person just didn't know what was going to happen. And like, I don't know if we're rolling. Let's try to find it. Like, it's like super amateur hour. And that just like jumped out at me because it's something like I criticize introductory level freshmen who've never taken a film course for doing. And here it is on a network TV show.
Well, take that, Mitchell Leisen. Okay. Closing narration.
Yeah.
Species of animal brought back alive. Interesting similarity in physical characteristics to human beings in the head, trunk, arms, legs, hands, feet. Very tiny, undeveloped brain. Comes from primitive planet named Earth. Calls himself Samuel Conrad. And he will remain here in his cage with the running water and the electricity and the central heat as long as he lives. Samuel Conrad has found the Twilight Zone. I like it. Definitely going after humans.
I dug that one, except for the way that he said the Twilight Zone. I wanted it to just be sort of like tied into the prior sentence. Like, he'll remain here with the running water and the electricity and the central heat as long as he lives in his cage in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, that'd be
instead
good.
of it being a separate sentence. But yeah, I like this one.
Serling was just trying to cue you up what the main character's name was, and it obviously did not work because he mentions it twice in the closing narration.
And it did not help because I still call him Marcuson.
Yeah.
I did like that the closing narration kind of takes the twist of like specifically calling the aliens human beings, and this is, Conrad is a different species.
Yeah.
Instead of him being, I don't know. I thought that was a nice little twist.
Yeah, I like both narrations.
Still not nearly as good as the pity of it is these things cannot be confined to the Twilight Zone.
Yeah, monsters are due on Maple Street. Okay, let's rank some sweat level.
Well, after some not very sweaty episodes, we had a lot of sweating going on here. I think Conrad was sweaty the entire time. Marcuson was sweaty for good portions of it. They weren't dripping, but they were definitely sweaty. So I'm going to give this like a 6.
Okay, all right.
What do you think?
I had like a 4 because I felt like the sweat was justified, but I care.
That's fair. I think we can
5.
average out
How
to
about
a 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And then do you want to
And
start?
there were no mirrors.
I don't care. Okay, let's rate it. What do you think? Or do you want me to start?
Yeah. Why don't you start?
So I kind of cheated a little bit and looked back at some of our other ratings to see where I thought this one fell, because I kind of felt it was like sort of okay. I landed at about a 3.5, I think, on this one, because like it was a cool Twilight Zone-y feeling episode. I thought there was some stuff that was done well. I thought Roddy McDowall's acting was good enough, but I wasn't super invested in anything that was happening, honestly. And there was some silly kind of unexplained stuff that we talked already about, and it was like, okay. But I did like Serling's message about humanity, and so that's why I think I bumped it up a little bit for that. What did you think?
Can I throw out? I did not even notice that was Roddy McDowall. I was so fascinated with trying to figure out if that was Henry Gibson that I completely ignored all the other actors. I think I'm the same as you conceptually on this. Like, I was very kind of met on the episode. Like, it wasn't horrible. It wasn't great. It was fine. I did like that there was kind of suspense the whole way through, and I didn't really know how things were going to play out or what the payoff was going to be. But as we've talked about, like, the ultimate idea of it, I don't think was super interesting. It was like, surprise, agreed. He's in a zoo. I guess like a 3. This is like an average episode. Can you tell me some 3s and 3.5?
Yeah, I'd also probably be down for a 3. But 3s, Where Is Everybody, Mr. Denton, Perchance to Dream, A Shot and Arrow,
I feel like this is about there, other than
Yeah.
Mr. Denton, which I know we keep saying we need to maybe retroactively up a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. And then 3.5's The Lonely, which I think is just because I boosted us up to a 3.5. I think it's our only 3.5. So if you're saying that The Lonely is a better episode than this, we can go with a 3.
I think The Lonely definitely had more
Interesting.
like thought provoking ideas
Agreed.
in it. And I don't think the execution on either of them was markedly better or worse than the other
I'd be down
in
with a 3.
terms of like the production and stuff. So
Yeah, because I frankly I like
let's go.
I like Mr. Denton probably better than this episode, so I'd be down with a 3, and then we can retcon Mr. Denton at some
I
point.
think let's go ahead and retcon Mr. Denton up to like 3.5, so we have another 3.5 because our
Deal.
3s are getting crowded.
Okay. I like Mr. Denton better than that. And then we have to put Walking Distance up to a 3.5 too, from a 2.5, because I don't know what we were thinking.
And we need to I think we also need to retcon what was our sweat level on Mr. Denton. I think we also went low on that
3.
one. Yeah, that's got to be like a 7 or 8.
Yeah, I'm making that a
Make
7.
it a 7.
Okay, fair enough. All right, Mark, are you ready to guess what next week's episode is going to be about?
Sure.
It's going to be a tough one. Simply titled Execution. This is a Twilight Zone episode. Execution.
It's I'm thinking of the old video series Faces of Death. It's just like
God.
different ways people got killed.
Yeah. Ugh.
And they would like reenact it, but then like when it got to the climactic moment, it would always be like some terribly badly done effect.
I never actually watched that. That came out at every single sleepover I went to in grade school, and I always avoided watching that. That's like Two Girls, One Cup. I'll never see it. Probably the final season of this Twilight Zone I'll probably never see because we'll never make it. There's certain things that I just don't need to see, and that's one of them.
So execution. Well, it's funny when you say execution, the first thing that came to my mind, honestly, was like what we talk about with the episodes, like how well it was executed as opposed to like killing. But I'm going to assume that the title has something to do with someone literally being killed. I'm going to say it's a prisoner on death row who is due to be executed and gets a chance to forestall that. And there's some sort of monkey's paw situation.
I think I remember this episode, and I think you're going to be. Well, we'll tune in next week to see how close Mark was on his guess. Thank you all for listening. This was Deja Reviewed. As we said, next week's episode is episode 26 of season 1 of The Twilight Zone, titled Execution. Feel free to leave us a rating and a comment wherever you're listening to us. If you're enjoying the podcast, please subscribe because that helps us out. Or you can find us at dejareview.com, and there you can leave us a voicemail or a text message about any of these episodes, and we'd love to hear them. And we hope that you tune in next week.
Deja Review.
Deja vu.